to Love, Hope, and Faith with Heather Murdoch.
Welcome back to Love, Hope, and Faith, and we have too much fun off camera.
Yes, we do.
Yes, so, okay, so I wanted to hear about your story, Stephanie, because a lot of people will want to know where you came from.
I came from Palo Alto, California, but I grew up with my mom and my dad, and I'm the oldest of two, so I have a sister who's 4 years younger than I am, and was exposed to Christ as a young person. My mom and her family definitely grew up in a Christian home. My dad did not. And I remember my aunt taking me to church when I was little. And there was a time in my parents' life, they're actually getting ready to celebrate their 50th wedding anniversary.
Wow, that's awesome blessing.
Yes, it is. But there was a time in their life, like many marriages, where they really struggled.
Yeah.
And in that time of struggle and being around 6, I was really scared. I remember very clearly, my sister and I had bunk beds, and I very clearly remember calling out to Jesus and telling him I was scared and I was frightened and that I needed him. And there was this immediate peace and this immediate comfort that came over me.
Yes.
And so at that age, I knew he was with me. And, and I don't even remember what I said in my little 6-year-old brain, but just having that immediate feeling of protection and safety.
It's amazing when we cry out to him, how he shows up.
Yes, it is. And then went to church on and off with my parents, very involved when I was in junior high, first part of my high school years. Moved up to Sacramento from the Bay Area, kind of fell away from church, but never fell away from God.
Right.
But just not really walking out my faith in an active way, and then kind of in and out of church, and met my husband. We just celebrated our 27th wedding anniversary, and we've been together for 29 years. Mm-hmm. And my husband's not a believer, and so that's been an interesting journey. And as I've grown, as I've matured in my faith, and just as I've matured as a woman, it's really changed our relationship. And being able to, and talk about, I love how you started off with being out in God's creation.
Yeah.
We had, like many marriages, Christian or non-Christian, we had some really tough struggles.
Yeah.
And I remember we had been out hiking with the dogs, and it was just he and I sat and I was sitting on a log, and he was off playing with the dogs, and I went, God, I accept him for who he is.
Amen, Stephanie.
I love him I love him the way you love him. I see him the way you see him. And that was just...
That's powerful and freeing, isn't it? Because so many times we want to change our husbands.
Yes.
Yeah.
And so, but that allowed me to start working on me.
You.
Yes.
The only person you can change.
The only person I can change is me.
Yeah.
But in doing that, that's changed our relationship. We are so completely different than we were, and it's because I stopped. Not that I cared probably more for him at that moment than I had ever cared for him in his life. I love him more now than I did when we even got married. But it's through that surrender of saying, he's yours. Thank you for the gift, but he is yours, and I'm going to walk out my life, the remainder of my life, just seeking you and seeking your will and your guidance, and really letting him have his walk, letting him have his time. And so it's been a really interesting journey, because we talked about the first segment, running a Christian women's organization when he's not a Christian.
So does he support you, though, in your
He does support me
vision?
to the best of his ability.
Right,
he cannot really support me completely.
Because he can't relate.
Because he can't relate.
Yeah.
And so, as a guy, he's all about the bottom line and money. And as a business, that's important. We do need to steward our resources well.
Absolutely.
We do live in a society that requires money to build God's kingdom. And so there is that aspect of what we do. But there's a greater eternal impact that he can't get understand or see yet.
So what can you tell our viewers if there's someone watching today, that a woman watching, or even a man for that matter, that
Right.
has a spouse that is not believing, and I know that can be a big discouragement. What can you say to them?
Just have faith. I mean, really, it's not your burden to bear, it's God's. Be prayerful for them, but if you are constantly praying in that place of just, that anguish, oh my gosh, they're not saved, then you're not allowing God to do what only God can do.
That's right.
That's almost becoming an idol to you, because you're
right.
taking your focus off of Jesus,
Yes.
and you're putting your focus on that. And and it's hard, I mean, as a woman, especially when they're your loved ones. I mean, they're the people that you care most about, and you want nothing but the best for them. And so it's that place of just going, okay,
Yeah.
like, I have to trust you on this one. And I can see, just as I've grown, as I've had a more personal and intimate relationship with Jesus, how that's changed him. And I've had some really difficult conversations with him and around him. But we do have a different level of respect for one another that we've never had before. And it's because I'm respecting myself more than I've ever respected myself, because I know who I am in Christ.
identity,
My identity is in Christ. It's not in my parents. It's not in what the world thinks.
It's not your husband believing what you do.
No,
Yeah,
it's
it's
my
not him accepting
identity is in Christ. And so
Yeah.
therefore, if you hold on to that and you let God be God, and work on yourself and just be more like Jesus today than you were yesterday and last week and last year, they can't not but see a difference.
That's right.
And
And
be
I-
hungry for that.
Exactly. And I have a very similar story. Long story short, my husband was a believer, but not actively walking it out. But he's the one really that got me my first Bible. So that's really, I love that. But, I just went all in right away. And he was like, believe, but he's like, well, I'm busy on Sundays. And, I'll go to church when I want to go to church. And I'm like, no, we're going to church every Sunday. This is our new life. We're doing this.
Right.
And he really rebelled like most men would. They didn't want to be controlled. And he was dug in and said, it's good for you and I'm happy for you,
Yep.
but I will go when I want to go. And I would get ready for church, and just be, as loud as I could be, and brushing my hair and turning on the blow dryer really loud, and, just like trying to make a point, you
Right.
know. Very resentful and bitter, not at all being Christ-like. And so God really convicted me of that. And it's very similar to what you've said.
Right.
He said to me, you're not loving your husband like I love your husband.
Right.
And as soon as I backed off, like you've said, and surrendered and really just love my husband without trying to prove a point or
Yes.
prove him wrong or make him do something, just in a few weeks, in fact, he started coming. And when one of my girlfriends asked him, whose husband wasn't going to church, she said, how did Heather do it? How did she get you to come to church? And he said, it wasn't anything that she did. He goes, I just saw the change in her. I see a light in her, and I want
Yes.
that light too.
Yes.
And it was so confirming,
Yes.
to what you're saying.
Yes,
Yeah,
absolutely.
Yeah. So
absolutely.
there's huge fruit in that.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Good. Okay. So then you were saying, so you married your husband and you got into business?
Yes,
Okay.
got into business. Was in corporate America, like a lot of women are, and had my kids and wanted to find a balance between. I definitely have been designed to be in work. And
Right,
so
right.
that's also a very different dynamic, because a lot of times the formal church doesn't know what to do with women who
Work.
are in the marketplace
Yeah.
and by choice. But that's just the way God designed me. And so that's a whole nother story. That's a whole nother journey.
That's a whole nother show.
That's a whole nother show. And just really living in that place of what that looks like. And so had the honor to be a kind of work-at-home, stay-at-home mom. I did have my own business. I have always been in retail. So I started off with Macy's, grew up through there, or literally grew up working for Macy's. I started when I was 18, and I left 18 years later as a store line senior executive, and got into another form of retail. I worked as it was a kind of a liaison between a software development company and a software chain that sold our point of sale and inventory control system. And then it was like, oh my gosh, this is so much fun. Like, this kind of stuff exists. I could run my own business. I had never been exposed to small retail. I'd always been big box.
Right.
And I'm like, oh my gosh, this would be really cool. So long story short, went to Texas, visited my best friend, or one of my best friends, saw what her sister-in-law was doing, and I'm like, I could do that. So I brought this idea back to California, and it was doing, instead of having a brick and mortar, I had a store outside of, in my car that I brought into people's offices and homes and office buildings. And
So you're mobile.
I'm mobile.
Yeah.
And at our height, I had 9 women working for me in 3 states, and was the buyer and the marketer and all of that. And we sold purses and jewelry and accessories and gift items and all of that fun stuff. But not really having a business background and understanding, cash flow and the ins and outs and all of that, it was definitely like, oh, I'm going to do this jump.
Yeah, exactly.
And I did, and it definitely was a blessing on multiple levels. And but not having that business background and truly understanding those other sides of business, I got myself into a really big financial hole. And it got progressively worse and not better. And then the economy did what the economy did. And I was in debt to about the tune of $30,000. Wow. And my husband's all about money, which, again, no fault. That's just how he was brought up. And it's an important thing. I'm not discounting it.
Of course, yes.
But I kept the secret because I didn't want him to know how poorly I had run my business. I didn't want him to think less of me. We were definitely in a very different place in our relationship then. We didn't have a true openness about stuff.
Because at this point, you had said you'd fallen madly in love with Jesus, but this wasn't then yet.
This was not. This is the leading up.
This is the valley.
This is one of my valleys. And I will say, be careful what you pray for. In the sense of, when you pray, often for myself, I've often prayed in the flesh, wanting the easy solution, the easy answer. And
fix it, God.
Fix it, God, but fix it the way I want it. I want it easy.
Exactly.
I never wanted to give up my debt. I never wanted to not honor that I had financial responsibility, so I wasn't looking to go bankrupt. Not that that's wrong, but for me, it was like, I want to own up that this is something that I need to be responsible.
Follow through on your responsibilities.
Follow through. Okay.
On that note, we're going to take a break.
Okay.
We'll be right back. Stay tuned.